What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode here of the BlockHash podcast, your number one resource for all that is happening across the emerging tech space. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. Today, I'm joined by another exciting guest, Scott Stuart, founder of Kava, a leading blockchain known for its speed and interoperability. We're going to talk about things such as Kava's ecosystem, what they're doing with AI and AI-powered tools. We're going to talk about what they're doing in regards to DeFi and a number of other things that they have on their timeline here in 2025. Scott, welcome to the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you on. How you doing?
Thank you for having me on, Brendan. I'm good.
To get things started, I'm sure the best way would be maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm sure people would love to know a bit about your background, how you got into the space. Everyone's always got a interesting story in terms of getting into Web3, given how young it is. What was your initial inception point, and what got you interested, and also what kind of led to Kava?
Yeah, well, so actually, yeah, thanks for asking that. Actually, my first touch point was with Bitcoin was like all the way back in 2012. I did
Oh, wow.
internet poker. So I did internet poker back in the past, and in the U.S., in 2012, the U.S. government blocked the ability for banks to settle with internet poker sites, which meant that a lot of the more professional or higher end players had to either go out of the country or use like alternate methods of depositing value onto these sites. And Bitcoin was one of those. I remember looking at Bitcoin when it was like $100 and being like, I don't know what this is, not worth my time. And then I ended up going out of the country and playing internet poker for a while. And I know a number of people who really got on to those like Bitcoin sites and probably made way more with that than they did with poker. So I did that for a while, went back to the US and started an ad tech company in Boston. And then in 2017, mid 2017, is when I got into crypto. And this was kind of during that Ethereum ICO phase. And like many startups, started in one place and just wiggled our way to where we are today.
There you go. You're probably one of the first people in a while I've interviewed that's actually been in the space longer than I have.
I would say that I was not in the space. Like
More or
had
less, more or
I
less.
had I actually gotten in, I think that would have been pretty good. But yeah, I at least saw it a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, my first inflection point was buying Bitcoin in 2013, and then that eventually led me to being in the space. But those feel like some really old OG days at this point. It definitely was a different world for Bitcoin and what was, a handful of cryptocurrencies, if anything, back then.
Yeah, I mean, I remember so when I was out of the country and there was this little poker enclave that had formed, and one of these guys. So in poker, you'll have people who either, are sort of professionals that show up every day and work, or some people just kind of get lucky and win tournaments. And so there
Hmm.
was this one kid coming from Las Vegas who was sort of that latter camp, and he showed up and he was like kind of weird, awkward guy, but he was doing this like Bitcoin mining, like on his computer. And I remember being like, okay, whatever. Again, this guy's weird. Like he can do his thing. I think that guy's like the wealthiest, like of all of
Probably.
the poker players during the card. So it's like, yeah, you never know with very early stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I think we all wish we knew today what we were doing back then. It would have probably made a lot more people mine Bitcoin on their computers, but who would have known? Scott, tell me a little bit about Kava. I'm curious, maybe what your guys' core mission is for Kava. Like, what problem or problems is it trying to solve as a blockchain, and what kind of separates it apart from some of the other chains out there?
So Kava had its start in Q4 of 2019. It did like a launch pad event with Binance.
Hmm.
And that had a lot of success. And then that kind of dovetailed into that DeFi summer, if you remember, with Compound.
Yep.
And we worked closely with Rob back then in 2020. And it was around this time that so Kava started as basically a MakerDAO for Bitcoin, and BNB built on this Cosmos blockchain. So this one of this popular non-Ethereum based chains at the time. And so Kava's DNA has always been around DeFi and around interoperability.
Hmm.
And so we kind of had some success because we were very early. in the Cosmos ecosystem, we were the earliest in terms of taking what was out there in the Ethereum land and putting it into the Cosmos space and making it interoperable. And that kind of also snowballed. We were able to win things like exclusive Tether uh, integration and partnership, where Kava's the de facto Tether supplier to the Cosmos. So if you ever see USDT on any Cosmos chain, that's being minted on Kava and sent with IBC over there. Same with WBTC. So work with the WBTC folks to issue WBTC on Kava and spread that across the Cosmos. And so that worked very well in 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. But again, like every sort of technology set, an emerging technology set, you want to make sure that you're including the things that are high growth, or that the things that you think are going to be high growth. And so while Kava has a solid foothold in DeFi and certainly is one of the most, if not the most, used interoperable chains out there between the Cosmos and Ethereum, 2025 has a large focus with community grants around AI and decentralized AI, and that's kind of the main push. And we can talk
Hmm.
more about that too.
Yeah, I'm sure some of that is also pretty attractive for developers that are, building on top of Kava, right? That interoperability, the speed, some of the things you take away from, what Cosmos was doing in their ecosystem really well. Um, are those some of the most attractive elements you'd say for a developer when they're looking to build an application or build some kind of use case?
Yeah, well, I just think like honestly in the DeFi space, right? Like there was a lot that was going on in 2021, 22, 23. There's still interesting things, but that frontier of possibilities has been largely explored today. There are
Hmm.
other interesting RWA stuff that's coming out, and so that's definitely worth looking at. But in terms of diminishing returns, there's just that space has been well explored. People are gonna keep doing it. That's not gonna stop. I think what's appealing to people about AI and decentralized AI is just how new and how used AI technology tool sets are, and how they are just still rapidly evolving. It's not solved by any means in terms of what the future state looks like. And I think that's what has people really excited about the possibilities for AI generally, and then how you could actually do that in an open and decentralized way specifically.
Okay, cool. And then are those some of the things that you're seeing being developed in Kava's ecosystem, like RWAs, DeFi? Do you see offshoots into things like NFTs or gaming, or what's kind of like the general gist of what's being developed thus far within Kava's ecosystem?
Yeah, yeah. So Kava has an EVM on it, just like Binance Smart Chain. And
Hmm.
again, as I had mentioned, a lot of these layer ecosystems are converging on similar things, right? So yes, there are DEXs that trade spot, DEXs that trade perpetuals. You have NFTs as an outcrop of that, and you
Hmm.
also have meme coin platforms as an outcrop of that. Lending platforms, CDPs, RWA. There's some benefit that Kava has in that we have those native integrations with USDT and WBTC, and those are themselves integrated onto the largest exchanges like Binance, that allow users to be able to move funds easily on and off exchange using native assets as opposed to, on Arbitrum or something where you're going to be using like a synthetic version of the asset. So that's kind of like the core bread and butter DeFi things, and I think that we are seeing a fair amount of work, particularly in the stablecoin space. And my personal belief is that while when we're talking about DeFi, to me the most interesting thing is stablecoins because yes, you can trade on DEX, and it could be possible. And we've seen, with there's certainly been some very, very compelling UX for DEXs coming out. So we may see more and more liquidity from centralized exchanges going onto DEX. So that is interesting. But when we think about, meme coins, lending platforms, whatever, those are all nice. But I think probably my guess is the biggest area for growth in the next 5 or 10 years is going to be in stable coins. And the very nice thing from a layer one's perspective is that every layer one competes for layer stablecoin transactions, whether it's
Hmm.
Tether or Circle, which is doing fantastic now with its public offering. I think it's valued at like almost 30 billion. Inherently, when they issue a USDT or USDC, they have to issue it on a blockchain, right? And
Hmm.
so in that way, you're there's an equal footing between Kava competing for USDT settlement and Ethereum or Tron competing for USDT settlement. And there's a network effect there. So to the extent that you are able to get more users and more assets deposited onto your chain and then used as a layer of settlement, I think that will continue to be a very big driver of demand in the future. And so my personal belief is that stablecoins, as they relate to DeFi, are very interesting and something that we want to see continue to increase.
Yeah, I never would have imagined stablecoins being this popular and being this hot right now. From the Genius Act being passed here in the U.S., finalized pretty soon, to major banks like Bank of America wanting to create their own stablecoin in house or with outside partners. Like it's just kind of weird because all the attention has always been on Bitcoin and Ethereum and altcoins and what you can do in the space, in terms of building out applications and smart contracts, and that's still happening, but it's like this entire year and a half or so has been very heavily focused on stable coins and how you can integrate into different systems, how they can make things more streamlined and fluid, yield generation on stable coins, how they can be used in TradFi as well. A lot more TradFi, DeFi collaborations coming to light. It's a very interesting time because I never would have expected this direction to take place, at least this soon.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think as you mentioned, like who knew Bitcoin in 2012, right? But
Yeah.
similarly, like I remember in 2017, we worked very closely with the Tether folks for a while, and I remember in 2017 we were in like what was it, like Zug or something for one of these like ICO things, and the CEO of Tether at the time, like I remember like verbatim him basically saying like Tether is just a public utility, right? It's never going to make money. It's just a utility for the crypto industry. And this is back when Tether's, AUM is maybe 100 million, maybe 100 million with 0% rates, right?
Hmm.
And then you fast forward like what, like 7 short years later, they're over 100 billion in AUM with 5% rates, which is like now just a monster business. And again, hindsight, you're like, oh my God, I should have created, this thing. But then Tether had to go through that whole FUD cycle as well, right? I mean, people were hating on Tether as much as they were hating on Binance and Ripple. And now you see, all of those companies doing tremendously well. So that, I mean, that is kind of the fun thing about emerging markets, right? Is that's the fact that it's emerging market is you can't tell what exactly is going to win. Um,
Yeah.
but also similarly, I think there's still that proposition today, and you can place that bet in a public market on the Circle stock, right? Like to me, there is a large difference between the offering that Tether has with USDT in their positioning and Circle in their positioning, right? I mean, Tether has explicitly positioned itself outside of the US. So they're saying we will do everything outside of the US and basically nothing directly inside the US. Whereas Circle's taken the opposite approach, right? While
Hmm.
Circle tries to get into non-US areas, it's basically, and you can look at their S1, it's basically their partnership and collaboration with Coinbase that has driven a bulk of the flows, and they do have to pay a large percentage of revenue to Coinbase to do that. And I think that kind of goes, like if we're just talking about stablecoins for a sec, that kind of goes back to that thing where Tether has proven that it is an absolutely amazing business if you can get it. However, the network effect is so strong that the name of the game for stablecoins is demand. Where do you find demand for stablecoins? Tether is obviously the king of that. If you look at Circle, over like 50% of what they make has to go to their distribution partners. And when you look at a project like FDUSD, which is basically the thing that Binance uses to settle or tries to use to settle after BUSD was canned they're paying upwards of 80% of those flows to of that revenue to Binance. So I think it's very, very difficult to find demand, and I think it remains to be seen what the demand for USDC will be. If they are able to integrate into banks and get settlement that way, fine. But if I was placing my bet, I would say that we're going to keep seeing Tether go up because there's a real value proposition for non-US people to hold a stable store of value called the dollar, at least in the current perspective. So the jury is still out on who wins. Well, I think Tether wins, but it's still unclear who wins and by how much, like in this stablecoin race.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to watch. And you mentioned them being outside the country, and this kind of leads into another thing I want to ask you that you brought up before this about these reverse mergers and what's happened over the last few years in the U.S. and driving a lot of things offshore into other jurisdictions because the U.S. environment was too harsh and overregulated. And now this new administration has done a full 180, and it's like, oh, come back, we love you, we want you here. What are you seeing kind of on that front that you can touch on?
Yeah, well, I think, the kind of fun and fascinating thing about crypto is that like look at just Bitcoin specifically. Bitcoin means so many different things to so many different people, right? Yet it's the same asset. And so when it comes to things like crypto assets or assets generally, there's a number of ways that you can look at it. But one important way that I think is valuable to look at these assets is their liquidity. One of, I think, the most beautiful things that Bitcoin was able to create was just a disgusting amount of liquidity for this asset, such that, I mean, you can move through as much Bitcoin as you reasonably want in a day on exchange. And there's this kind of saying liquidity begets liquidity. The reverse is true. Many, many, many altcoins are having a very hard time finding liquidity as markets are drying up, and like altcoin markets are drying up, and we're seeing a consolidation generally within the industry, which is very normal thing to see at like a 6, 7 year mark, kind of for altcoins and like exchanges. Um, and so what we've seen with it, as you mentioned, this kind of 180 is we basically went from this kind of like Biden Gensler regime where it's like get away as fast as you can, and we saw this burgeoning of offshore, from the U.S. perspective, offshore foundations and all these other ways to basically get as far away from the U.S. as possible. And now you kind of have this complete 180 where Trump's saying, AI and crypto are of national security, and you have an SEC that is making real rule sets out there for crypto to come in. The result of that is there are a number of projects who are seeing this and saying, well, okay, now this is an opportunity for liquidity, for attention, and for some value. And so we're seeing, starting as you would expect with Bitcoin and moving down the way to ETH, Solana, Avalanche, all the way down, a number of folks within these communities are doing these reverse mergers of NASDAQ companies. And I can walk through that briefly if you want me to
Yeah,
explain
please,
how that
please do.
works. Yeah, how that works. So the classic. So you look at Sailor. So Sailor and MicroStrategy is kind of this first thing. They did a great job of getting that out real early, and so that was the only way to bet on Bitcoin for a while. And then ETFs came along, and so you might say, okay, well, Sailor and the MicroStrategy thing is done because there's ETFs. Well, what people are betting on with stuff like MicroStrategy is that this management company is able to maximize the amount of Bitcoin per share. And so these guys are going to, if I hold a stock, a share of MicroStrategy, well, the reason that I might do that instead of holding Bitcoin itself or an ETF of Bitcoin is because Sailor is going to accumulate more Bitcoin per share than if I held Bitcoin myself. And so it's kind of, so if you are already naturally long the asset, then Sailor comes along and it's kind of like you can flip a coin, heads you win, tails you break even type thing, right? And
Hmm.
so maybe that's true, or that remains to be seen. But that's effectively the value proposition. And now we're seeing a number of those coming out in different jurisdictions. So in uh, uh, Japan, in Brazil, there are some big fundraisers. 21 with SoftBank and Tether is a really big one that's coming out in the US. And then we're seeing it move down with Lubin doing stuff with ETH and Sol Strategies, Avalanche, and all the way down. And again, it remains to be seen how much liquidity and how much kind of premium comes out of this. But this is a new area, and it basically, I view it as a positive thing, right? Where it's this kind of cat and mouse thing with regulators before, but when you at least when you view it from the perspective of the rule set of the U.S., if the U.S. has a clear rule set on what they're looking for, then just like public companies, if a crypto company provides sufficient disclosures, they say, here's basically the way in which we operate, and they operate within that set of disclosures, you've kind of like torn the band-aid off and like gone towards the light. And typically speaking, not always, but typically speaking, historically, projects or companies that take active steps uh, do things in an appropriate way in a capital formation economy like the U.S. or like the Nasdaq, on average, typically do better than the ones that kind of stay lurking in the shadows. And so I would say all top 30 projects that are US based, many just top projects that are US or have US founders or have been US based at some time, are seriously taking a look at this as an opportunity to get more liquidity, to get more attention, to get more clarity, and use that as a way to sort of like win and get more capital and continue like promulgating their ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time, especially seeing a lot of these different partnerships and collaborations now coming together as, a lot of these companies try to come back to the US. I think it's at a very good and opportune time where we're seeing that shift in the regulation structure with, the government, the SEC, and, wanting to actually see this develop out in the US into different use cases. It's still baffling to me that a year and a half ago, it was completely the other way around. And it felt like everyone was running away and we were all like kind of panicking. Maybe, US dominance for capital in the space was going to fall apart. And then, it comes back immediately. So we're living in a very interesting and exciting, I think, point in time to see what kind of happens here. But as you kind of mentioned, you're seeing a lot of those stuff kind of play out already, and you're seeing these partnerships and different collaborations kind of come to light.
Yeah, and I think it's opportunity. I mean, the reality, as you said, year and a half ago, is the two largest economies in the world, China and the U.S., had
Mhm.
either explicitly or implicitly attempted to ban this industry. And so the result is that all of the talent went to these jurisdictions like Dubai, Singapore, set up stuff in Cayman, right? And so it didn't stop it, but it definitely was not an accelerant. To the extent that the US actually opens up, I don't know what China's going to do, but to the extent that the US actually provides a rule set and allows, like in a sort of sane way,
Mhm.
retail to be able to have access, I think that, like I said, the projects that kind of get to the front of the line do a very good job of that and get out first are likely to have success with that.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the camp that I think this is going to be a huge accelerant for the US economy over the next couple of years. And I imagine, and China's already taking steps in doing this through certain proxies and through Hong Kong, where they can kind of like, pretend they're not capitalist or not communist a little bit and be a little bit more capitalist in terms of touching this stuff. I think that they're going to open up their economy to it a bit more just so that they're in lockstep with the US's growth. Because I think there's going to be a number of different things like AI as well. They're going to allow for capital to expand in the US with all the money that's coming in and all the innovation and interest, whether it's Web3 and crypto, whether it's AI or some of these other innovations. I'm pretty sure China will do the same thing at some point because they have a big economy too. Second biggest, if not, pretty much in lockstep with the US at this point. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do, because that's just throwing fuel on the fire at some point if they do. Another thing I want to ask is, I know Kava is doing a lot with AI. You guys have these AI powered tools as well. Some of them serving a purpose combined with DeFi can help with improving yield strategies and automation. I'm curious, maybe what you guys are doing in terms of the AI front when you combine that with Kava.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we can finish with this. I'll kind of go on that. But
Sure.
basically, yeah. I mean, at a high level, right? I mean, you have AI. It's not going anywhere, right? I mean, it's just been amazing in the last year and a half what we've seen. And then once you really get your hands dirty in it and you get into it, like it's just fascinating. It really
Hmm.
feels like crypto in 2017,
Oh yeah.
where you have massive, massive players, obviously like NVIDIA, OpenAI, etc. But still, the tooling, the way things are built out, the resource constraints, right? It has all of the ingredients for being like a very exciting and potentially highly profitable new industry for folks who want to get in there and do it. And at a high level, right, the main thing that, you could call really open AI or decentralized AI is going for is saying this technology set is not going to go anywhere, but there are risks, right? If we see AI as basically, a new way for humans to be able to access information about the world, then it has all of the same problems that we had with social media and the Web 2 related stuff. It's who controls it and what are they trying to have you do. And when you see companies like Microsoft, Facebook, or Meta, etc., who have already clearly shown that their interest is to collect your information and show you things that are most profitable for them, then when they layer AI on top of it, it's pretty hard to believe that they're doing that, for just some humanitarian reason, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, it's going to add significant value to people in their lives, but it becomes a really powerful tool for control and for being able to manipulate users towards their ends and not necessarily the user's ends. So this kind of, and then if you take that to an extreme, now you have these very powerful companies or nation states, right, like China, who are using these tools for control and for surveillance, and that's not the internet in the future that a lot of people want. And so, what this idea of decentralized or open source AI is all about is, can we develop very solid models and host very solid models at scale, making the code open source and the models open weight. So, like an Ethereum contract, when you interact with the thing, the output is what you expect it to be. So that's at its very high level, sort of a truly open AI is
Hmm.
not that different than something like Ethereum. Like I don't know if you run a full node, I don't run an Ethereum full node, yet I trust that when I send USDT or I interact with a smart contract, that it's going to be executed in the way that I want. And that trust has a relatively logical basis because all of that code is open sourced and people smarter than you and me look at that and determine that, yep, that is what they say it is, and then it gets trust built around it. The same way when executing prompts against an AI, you can have a set of people who are running machines that are going to host and provide responses to you on that prompt. You can have humans build models run against machines that weren't you. And all of these things can be hosted and you can interact with them, having the confidence that the thing's going to do what it says it does. And so at its highest level, that is what decentralized AI is like endeavoring to solve. And then there be dragons in terms of being able to do that at any kind of real scale. This is one of the primary challenges that Kava and its community is putting funding towards in 2025. Namely, can we have compelling open source, open weight models that are also hosted in a decentralized way where inference or serving of the responses can be done at any kind of real scale.
That's awesome. Do you want Kavita to primarily be a foundational layer for decentralized AI, or do you guys also want to build one out your guys' selves? It's still very new right now, but I mean, there's a lot of different people trying to do the same thing, and it's very fascinating. And I like the decentralized approach better because there's so many issues with this idea of centralized AI and what we have today, and it's
Provide a
yeah,
choice to a user, right? So yeah, maybe 80%, 90% of the market is centralized. But if 10% of the market, is this thing, it's still going to be a very large thing.
hmm
So and so where the stage that we're at, and this is kind of my style, right? Is yes, of course, we would like to have like the best in class models and have everything settle on the Kava blockchain. But the reality is that people who are honestly doing this, it's still in the learning and developing phase. It's still very,
yeah,
very early. And it's fascinating. It's been very, very fun to work with awesome teams and sort of like handle these challenges, which by the way, are the same challenges that OpenAI and any large centralized AI company is dealing with right now, in that these things are not trivially scalable. They're not just like trivially elastic. And there's just a lot of like work and talent and sweat and just development that needs to go into making these better and better solutions. And so that's been really fun, and that's something that's going to continue going for at least the next year.
that's very exciting. Keep me up to date on that. I love the whole decentralized AI aspect in the space, and it's cool seeing these two different communities really come together because, like you mentioned before, AI right now really does kind of feel like crypto where it was at in like 2017. And it's really like popping off and everyone's interested in it. There's all this capital flowing in, but seeing that blockchain is such a perfect, good coupled marriage with AI, and the things that we can do to help decentralize it, decentralize data, build out better, surface level foundations for it. I think is very, very fascinating. So definitely keep me updated on that stuff.
And a pro tip in the meantime for anybody is that generally speaking, with these types of things, outside of the explicit products that come out that lots of people use, right?
Hmm.
While those are being built, just sort of pay attention to the money and pay attention to the talent. There's lots and lots and lots of projects right now that are talking about AI and decentralized AI, but looking for where are the really good developers and researchers hanging out and actually working and getting jobs. And then, so you basically collating talent and then collating real resources for those talent. Typically, the projects that are doing that on average tend to be the ones that outperform.
Absolutely. That's a good tip. To wrap things up, what's on your guys' horizon for this year for Kava? Any important upcoming launches, announcements? Are you guys going to be at any events, conferences, engagements? What's kind of on the timeline?
Yeah, so we're always in the big events outside of the U.S. Currently still. So Token 2049, you can catch us there. We're going to have a big presence there at the end of the year. Binance is doing their event in Dubai. We'll be out there as well. And then just the big one for us this year, outside of the regular work that's happening, is really trying to get first in class with this decentralized AI. And then we can't really give like specifics yet, but as I had mentioned, all of the sort of like top sophisticated projects that have had some touch point in the US are looking at this NASDAQ liquidity. And that's definitely something that's of interest to the Kava community. And so that's being aggressively pursued as well.
Excellent. Where can people find the Kava community, or where would you send them? Website? Do you guys have a Telegram?
Yep, so you can check us out on Twitter at Kava Chain and kava.io for the website to see any updates and all the links to the community.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the description for the episode below so everyone can easily find it. Do you have a contact or LinkedIn if anyone wants to get in touch with you as well?
I would just you can find on the website and you can find on Twitter all of the Telegram links, and that's going to get you to the right people in the community.
Awesome. Sounds great, man. Scott, appreciate you taking the time today. It's been a really good conversation. Love what you guys are doing in terms of pushing towards decentralized AI and our conversation about the state of the market and where things are at and these reverse mergers and also Kava's ecosystem. I think you guys are onto some great stuff. So keep me updated and would love to do another episode with you in the near future.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's fun. You keep moving. Thank you.